When were you diagnosed with ADHD?
I think I was 13.
So you're going into high school?
Yeah, I think I was in 8th grade.
What exactly did the doctor say to you?
I don't remember. I know that he diagnosed me with depression, Tourette's, OCD, and ADD. Same thing. They can call it what they want. I'm dealing with it how I learned how to deal with it.
So you were going into high school. What kind of changes did the school make in order to how did they change your curriculum, or what did they do differently?
So that's especially interesting with me because my parents were both teachers. Like my entire family is essentially in the school system. So my parents were able to talk with teachers and get them to just teach them who I was. But the coolest thing, two things. Number one is that they knew that I loved computers, and they knew that I just focused when I had a computer. So they let me bring a computer, a laptop, back in what would it have been, like 1999 or 1998 even. The laptop had 1.42 gigabytes on it. That was how big the hard drive was of that laptop. But they allowed me to bring that into class and take notes with it. And so that was half of it. That was a third of it. The other third was that instead of going to lunch, I went to the special ed resource room. And even though I was an exceptional student, I just was terrible in the school environment. So, back in those days, the taboo was this is where dumb kids go, but that wasn't the case for me. It was just a case where I could go and get away from the noise of the, because I also turned out to be a social phobic through high school. So that was, instead of going to lunch, which is just this big, loud, crazy place with people that I didn't like and they didn't like me, I would go to the resource room, the special ed room, and I would do my homework there. So that way I wouldn't have to do my homework when I went home at night. And if I finished my homework before the end of the period, I could play a video game on my laptop before that was done. And then the third thing that they did was that they assigned me an aide, which was really just fun because, it was like hanging out with a friend. The aide was actually my friend beforehand because my mom was a special ed teacher. So I knew this lady through working with my mom. And just having her sit next to me in the classroom really just focused me. And, I could talk with her about the subject. And it was like talking with a friend about the subject.
So, how would you explain ADHD to someone who doesn't have it?
The best description that I think that I've found is having a whiteboard and having one single word on it. And then as soon as something else sparks your attention, it just erases whatever's on the whiteboard and writes that thing instead. So you can only have one thing. And
so it increases your ability to focus on one thing, but that thing changes?
Right, yeah. So even when I was taking Adderall helps you focus, but if you get say you're doing homework and then you get distracted by another thing, you're going to really focus on that other thing. So Adderall doesn't cure my ADHD, it just helps you focus really hard on whatever it is that you're actually focusing on. If I'm playing a video game, then I'm focusing on that. Straight and simple.
So, how did it affect your ability to learn actual subjects in school? Did it hold you back, or did it propel you?
No, because I think the nature of ADD, at least for me, is that I'm an obsessive learner. I just keep learning about everything, at all times. I think that the nature of the school system is one of disengagement with the students. So for me, to have a conversation with somebody and then actually physically do it, I learned so much about history because my dad was a history teacher, and we went to battlefields as a kid. That's kinesthetic. And just over the years, I've spent maybe 10 years in college, I had to develop my own system for learning and how do I actually learn. And I realized that it's going really wide at first and finding out like what the boundaries of a subject are, then finding out what the truths are, because within each book that you read about a certain subject, you're going to find differing views and differing truths, and then you kind of whittle it down and figure out what actually is the truth about those things, and then I'll actually step up and engage myself in the thing. So to have like a clear understanding, a clear picture of what it is that I should be doing, and then doing it. That's my system. It's forced me to be my own learner and kind of on my own. Because I can't just sit in a classroom and listen to people. I have, but I hate it.
So you mentioned Adderall. So what were the medical prescriptions that you were prescribed, and how have they either helped or hindered you?
Well, skipping the antidepressants, because that's kind of all that we did for a couple of years. I started taking Klonopin, which is an anti-anxiety medicine, and that helped me because it just loosened me up and made me feel less anxious when I was in a public setting. And I started taking Ritalin, and that was good. I was able to just like sit down and focus, and as long as I was in control of saying I'm going to focus on this, then I could focus on that. And then I started taking like the extended Ritalin. I forget what it was called. And then we switched over to Adderall, which is a different class of drugs. And Adderall helped, but I think it more so made me... I think it had just as many negative effects on me as it did positive effects. For one, I was just addicted to it, like straight up. I couldn't stop. I couldn't take a day off because I would crash, and then I'd have to take it the other day and then be afraid to quit again. So I dealt with that for about 3 years, and now I'm at the point where I just don't take any drugs. Well, I take a bunch of supplements, which are like special tailored to me. And I also cut out a lot of things in my diet that I've really realized infuriate my ADD. And I drink a lot of coffee, and it's a really good system for me.
So,
but yeah, what are
you're working on getting off of all prescription drugs and kind of tailoring it to a more natural solution for yourself, or?
Yes and no. I've tried this thing called modafinil before. If you've heard of that, it's Provigil. And that's really effective for me, and it's not addictive, and it's not a stimulant. That's what it is. It's not a stimulant. But it just helps me kind of grasp concepts. Because, my profession is difficult. Like music theory, technology, performing, like all of that stuff is really intense. And so you have to have your wits about you at all times. So that really helps me like cross the chasm, more or less. But really, like, a good lifestyle is essential to it. Like, no amount of Provigil will ever help you focus if I've eaten, for me, gluten or red dye number 40. Like, any food dyes, really. Sugar, my brain is just done. In each one of the foods, I actually, because I've taken them out of my diet, I know when I've had them. Because I can feel the exact effects of those things on me. Like, I know when I've had sugar because the sugar thing is happening, or the gluten thing is happening to me. And I feel it in my body, and I can sense it in my brain because I can't think in that specific way anymore.
So, last question. If you wanted to clear up one misconception about ADHD or ADD, what would it be?
I think that people think of us as annoying, but we're kind of like the most amazing people in the world because our brains just don't stop. And they're so interested in so many things. It's like that whiteboard thing. Like, even the most mundane thing is just extremely interesting to me. That's like the little water thing that my coffee cup made. I find that really interesting, and I could stare at it for like 20 minutes just for fun, and just try and find out what I can within it. And that really helped me. Actually, ADD really helped me as, I guess, as a composer, because you kind of go off. I mean, it helps and it hurts, because I can't actually sit down and compose for very long. But it helps me when I'm just like, oh, here's a thought, and then it helps me be creative. But it helped me as a philosophy major, because my mind would just like wander onto all these different things, and then I'd find holes in these arguments, and the teachers loved me for it, and they thought it was like a superpower, but it was just ADD. So I guess that's the one misconception that I find, is that people think it's a hindrance, and it can be. But if we know how to work with it, man, it's a superpower. It really is.
Cool. Thanks for talking about it.
Yeah, dude.